G'day everyone. Today, I've got a story that you'll want to hear. So go on, grab a cuppa, pull up a chair, and get comfortable. My channel is all about the magic of storytelling, and I reckon you'll want to join me for this one. It was a Sunday arvo, the kind where the heat rising from the asphalt makes the shadows dance. Chloe Callahan's old Holden Commodore was cruising down the Great Western Highway, a ribbon of blacktop stretching out towards the Blue Mountains. It was almost a year to the day since she'd handed in her badge, leaving the title of detective behind for good. In the passenger seat, her 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, let out a small sigh, bored by the blur of gum trees and dusty fields rushing past the window. "Mum, can we stop somewhere?" Sophie's voice was innocent, but it cut through the tense silence in the car. Chloe gave a vague nod, easing her foot off the accelerator. That's when she saw them. Two figures huddled in the gravel car park of a derelict, sun-bleached roadhouse. One was an old bloke, his face a roadmap of wrinkles baked by the Aussie sun. The other, lying limply beside him, was a yellow Australian Kelpie. The dog's ribs showed through its dusty coat like the frame of a forgotten kite. In front of them sat a flimsy cardboard sign with two words scrawled in shaky text. "Dog for sale, $5. "Mum, look," Sophie yelled, her finger pointing straight at the dog. A dull, familiar ache tightened in Chloe's chest. Not a dog. She'd sworn off dogs since that day. "No, Soph, we can't have a pet, remember?" But he looked so sad. "Mum, please, can we just look?" Sophie's eyes began to well up, a tactic Chloe was always powerless against. But her mind was flooded with a different memory, the scent of iron and the sound of her own voice. Laced with blame, the case that had cost her everything. And at the center of it, there had been a dog. "Just forget it, honey." Chloe hardened her heart, ready to drive on. But in that instant, as if it had heard her daughter's silent plea, the Kelpie, which had been resting its head on the dusty ground, slowly lifted its gaze. Its nose was dry and cracked. Its eyes had lost their spark. And then, Chloe's breath caught in her throat. A sharp hiss of air escaped her lips, and she felt a cold dread wash over her, like ice water flooding her veins. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. There, on the dog's neck, was an old scar, a thin, curved line carved into its flesh like a perfect crescent moon. "No way," she whispered, the words barely audible. It wasn't just any scar. 3 months ago, before she was forced off the case, it was the only real lead in the Miller disappearance, the case that had shaken Sydney to its core. A few strands of dog hair found on a blood-clean floor. A single, blurry CCTV frame showing a dog just like this one escaping from the back of a van, supposedly injured in the process. The description in the case file matched this scar. It was too perfect, too identical. Impossible, her mind screamed. This was over 100 kilometers from the crime scene in Chatswood. But even as her logic fought it, her detective's gut was screaming a warning. "Mum, are you okay?" Sophie's voice sounded distant. Chloe was frozen, her gaze locked on that scar. It was the mark of the curse that had consumed her career, her life, and her soul. Why was a dog with a scar identical to a key piece of evidence in a major missing persons case being sold for $5 on the side of the highway? Was this a coincidence, or was the nightmare she thought was over just beginning? In that frozen moment, the unanswered question echoed with a sense of utter despair. "Mum, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophie's voice snapped Chloe back to reality. But a chilling paralysis still held her body. In the rearview mirror, her daughter's face was a mess of worry and confusion. And beyond her, disappearing into the heat haze, were the old man and the Kelpie, their fading figures looking like they were mocking her escape from her own past. "Don't get involved. It's not your case anymore. You're not a cop, you're just a mum." She repeated the words in her head, but the image of that crescent moon scar was burned onto her brain. To look away now would be to betray the very core of who she was. With a short, sharp groan, Chloe wrenched the wheel. The tires shrieked as the car swerved in a violent U-turn. Ignoring Sophie's startled gasp, she gunned the engine and sped back towards the roadhouse. She skidded to a halt in the gravel lot and was out of the car before the engine even settled. She ran to the old man, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "This dog," she panted, "this dog, where did you find him?" The old man, who introduced himself as Tom, looked startled by the wild-eyed woman who had appeared out of nowhere. In a tired voice, he began to explain, "About 3 weeks back, I reckon, found him collapsed down by the riverbank. Half-starved, felt sorry for the fella. Spent my last few bucks feeding him up. But I can't afford to keep him." His story seemed genuine, but Chloe's suspicion remained. She knelt down slowly, meeting the dog's gaze. The Kelpie didn't flinch or cower. It just stared back, its eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness. "Soph, stay in the car. But just do it." Her tone was firm. Chloe reached a hand out to the dog. It was thin, but beneath the matted fur, she could feel the solid, wiry frame of a working Kelpie. She felt the warmth of its body, and then her fingers brushed against a worn leather collar. The dog's body tensed with a slight shiver. "There's something here," her intuition was screaming at her now. With trembling fingers, she carefully traced the collar's surface. Nothing, but she didn't give up. Sliding her fingers underneath, to the side pressed against the dog's skin. And then she felt it. A hard, flat object, different from the rough texture of the leather. A small plate. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It had been deliberately embedded into the lining of the collar. Hidden from view, she dug her fingernail into the gap between the leather and the plate, trying to pry it loose. The dog let out a soft, mournful whimper. "Sorry, mate," Chloe whispered. She didn't know if she was talking to the dog or to her own past. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever was on this plate was about to drag her back into the hell she had tried so hard to escape. What new despair was hidden here? Taking a deep breath, she pulled harder. With the sound of tearing stitches, the leather gave way. Chloe carefully peeled the plate free and held it up in the palm of her hand, letting the harsh sunlight catch its surface. It was a small, rectangular brass plate, tarnished with age. The engraving was faint, but her trained eyes made out the words instantly. "Max, 18 Willow Street, Chatswood." The blood drained from Chloe's face. Max, and that address. There was no doubt, it was the exact address where, 3 months ago, single mother Sarah Miller and her 8-year-old son, Leo, had vanished without a trace, sparking one of the biggest police investigations in recent New South Wales history. The crime scene flashed in her memory like a nightmare: the ransacked living room, the faint, chemical smell of bleach on the floor where blood had been, and the few strands of dog hair the forensics team had found. Neighbors had confirmed it. The Millers owned a Kelpie named Max. But on the day of the incident, Max had disappeared along with the mother and son. Chloe stared at the plate, stunned. The investigation had been run on 2 theories: a kidnapping for ransom, or a simple case of a mother running away. Chloe, however, had argued that the evidence pointed to something far more sinister, something meticulously planned, but her theories were shut down at every turn. "You're getting too emotionally involved. Chloe, take a step back. Cool your head." The man who'd said that, patting her shoulder with false concern, was the man she had trusted most. Her mentor, her friend, the man she looked up to like an older brother, Detective Inspector Dave Faulkner. A few days later, Chloe was abruptly and inexplicably removed from the case. There was pressure from Faulkner, but no explanation, just a cold, unreasonable order. It was a humiliation, a betrayal by the very system she had dedicated her life to. Her pride shattered. She had resigned. "Dave, why did you stop me?" she thought now. "Why did you look so afraid?" "Miss," the old man's voice pulled her from the swirling vortex of memory. Chloe clenched her fist around the small metal plate, its cold edges digging into her palm, reigniting the fire she thought had died. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a second chance, given to her by God or the devil. She didn't care which, a chance to expose the truth of the case that took everything from her. She stood up, her gaze shifting from the old man to the dog who now had his name back. Max. Inside her, the detective's instinct, dormant for a year, roared back to life like a caged beast. "Why was I taken off the case? What is Faulkner hiding? And where has this dog been for the last 3 months?" The question swirled, but her mind was strangely clear. There was no more running. Chloe wordlessly pulled out her wallet, took out the single $50 note inside, and held it out to the old man. Her hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, simmering rage. "I need to borrow your dog." "No, I'm buying him. Here." The old man's eyes widened at the $50 for a dog he was selling for $5. He saw the look in Chloe's eyes, the intensity, and seemed to understand. He slowly shook his head. "Don't need your money, love, but it looks like this fella's more than just a dog. He might have been waiting for someone just like you." Tom, the old man, gave a sad smile and gently patted Max's head. "Look after yourself, mate," he said softly. He handed the frayed rope lead to Chloe, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the shimmering heat haze without a backward glance. All that was left was Chloe, Sophie, and Max, who was watching them both with a quiet intensity. "Mum, you got him?" Sophie's face lit up. She ran to Max and wrapped her arms around his neck. Max didn't flinch. He just accepted the embrace, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. After dropping a confused but ecstatic Sophie at home, Chloe stood before a framed photo of her late husband. "Sorry," she whispered, "just got to go back to the old job. Just for a little while." She put Max in the back seat and started the engine. There was only one destination. The impossible, lonely hunt for a woman isolated from the police force had just begun. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed a number. The person on the other end was her one remaining link to that world. An old informant. "It's me, Callahan. Yeah, I'm still kicking. I need a favor. The Miller disappearance from 3 months ago. I need you to dig up the case files again, especially the sealed stuff. And while you're at it, run a full check on Detective Inspector Dave Faulkner. His financials, his mates, the works. I want to know everything." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Faulkner? Chloe, that case is cold, and if he finds out you're sniffing around, I'll pay, whatever it costs." Chloe cut in, her voice cold and hard. She had nothing left to lose, nothing but her fractured pride and an iron will to find the truth. As night fell, Chloe stood in front of the Miller house. The suburban street was quiet, but the yellow police tape still strung across the front gate was a raw, vivid wound. In the back seat, Max began to whine, a low sound deep in his throat. He stared out the window, his nose twitching as if recalling a memory. Chloe got out, clipped the lead to Max's collar, and started walking the perimeter of the property. Max's nose was glued to the ground, and he led her with a certainty that was unnerving. He pulled her around the back of the house, towards a dark, narrow track that led into the dense bushland bordering the property. He stopped dead. Whine, whimper. Max began to cry, a sound of pure grief, and started scratching frantically at the ground with his front paws. His eyes were fixed on the darkness of the bush, as if he could see his lost master just beyond the trees. The trail was cold. All she had to rely on was her own gut instinct in this one. Silent witness. Was there a path to the truth in this darkness? Chloe gripped the lead tightly and, with Max guiding her, took one step, then another, into the vast, unknowable black. The moment they stepped into the bush, the air turned cool and damp. The day's heat was gone, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the eerie calls of night birds. Max pulled Chloe hard, scrambling up a steep, barely there track. After about 20 minutes, guided only by the faint moonlight, Max stopped abruptly in front of a huge, fallen gum tree. He began to bark, a frantic, desperate sound. It was part scream, part furious roar. Then, as if possessed, he began digging at the soft earth and leaf litter beneath the fallen log. Dirt and leaves flew everywhere, hitting Chloe in the face. "Max, what is it? Settle down, mate." She pulled on the lead, but he ignored her completely, his eyes glowing with a strange light as he dug deeper and deeper. A cold dread washed over Chloe. She pulled out her phone, switching on the torch and aiming the beam at the spot Max was excavating. And then she saw it, a small, man-made object poking through the disturbed soil. Chloe pushed Max aside and used her own hands to clear the dirt. Her fingers touched fabric. She pulled it out carefully. It was a small, mud-caked kid's sneaker. Judging by the size, it had to belong to Leo Miller. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She dug deeper, and her fingers hit something hard. It was a hand-sized package, wrapped carefully in multiple layers of plastic. It was far too clean to have been buried here for long. Someone had hidden it here, deliberately. Swallowing hard, Chloe's trembling fingers tore open the plastic. Inside was a single, faded family photograph. The phone's light illuminated the faces of the people in the picture. There was Sarah Miller, smiling happily, with a young Leo in her arms. And next to them, a hand resting on Leo's head, grinning from ear to ear, was another man. The moment Chloe saw his face, her world stopped. The blood froze in her veins. The air left her lungs. She couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it. Standing with the Miller family, looking for all the world like a proud father and husband, was Detective Inspector Dave Faulkner, the man she'd trusted, the man who had ruthlessly torn her away from this very case. Dave, a strangled sound escaped her throat. Why was Dave Faulkner in an intimate family photo with the victims? Their relationship was clearly more than just a cop and a victim's family. So why had he hidden that fact from the investigation? And why had he been so desperate to get her off the case? The puzzle pieces clicked together in the worst possible way. The thick wall of trust she had built around him crumbled into dust. In the photo, Faulkner's friendly smile now looked like the grotesque mask of a devil. Betrayal. The word struck her like lightning. The pain was physical, a sharp, cold blade twisted in her back by the person she had trusted most. She almost collapsed, fighting to stay on her feet. The photo felt as heavy as lead in her hand. Memories flooded back. Faulkner was the one who taught her everything when she was a rookie. "We're the last line of defense, Chloe," he used to say with a booming laugh. "Never ignore the small stuff." She had always looked up to him. The ideal detective, a man driven by justice. But what if it was all a lie? He deliberately hid his connection to Sarah Miller. He saw Chloe getting too close to the truth. So he got rid of her. Yes, that had to be it. She remembered the look in his eyes when he told her she was off the case. The usual confidence was gone. He looked scared. "That bastard," she hissed. The grief of betrayal was instantly burned away by a black fire of pure rage. She shoved the photo into her pocket and stormed back down the hill, Max trotting anxiously at her heels. She couldn't trust the police anymore. Faulkner was too high up. If she went through official channels, he would crush her. She had to do this alone. She had to expose him herself. Back in her car, she called her informant again. Her voice was ice. "It's me. Things have changed. I want everything on Faulkner. Not just his money, his mates, where he goes, women, gambling habits. I don't care. Dig until you find dirt. Any little thing. I'll double your pay." The informant sensed the change in her. "Righto," was all he said. The next day, Chloe's obsessive investigation began. She spent hours in the state library, digging through old newspaper archives, researching Sarah Miller's background and social circles. At night, she pieced together the fragments of information from her informant, mapping out Faulkner's movements. A second face of the man she thought she knew began to emerge. Faulkner's wife had left him years ago, taking their son. He was drowning in debt to multiple loan sharks. And for the past few months, he'd been having secret meetings with the CEO of a notoriously ruthless property development company. A property developer. Why would a senior detective be meeting with a man like that? A feeling of unease crawled up her spine. Chloe searched for the company's current projects online. When she found a development map, she felt the blood run cold. The developer was aggressively pushing residents out of a prime redevelopment zone. And right in the center of that zone, marked in red ink, was one block of land. The name listed under the property owner was Sarah Miller. It all connected. This wasn't just a disappearance. For money, Faulkner had teamed up with a developer who wanted this land, and they had removed the inconvenient landowner. A wave of nausea and rage washed over her. Beneath the mask of a hero cop was a monster who had sold his soul for money. Exhausted, she returned to her small apartment late that night. As she opened the door, a small shadow bounded towards her. It was Max. He must have been waiting by the door all day. He wagged his tail, whining softly. The sight of him eased the tension in her shoulders. Just a little. In the living room, her daughter Sophie was asleep on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. Beside her was a bowl of water and some dog food for Max. Chloe gently stroked her sleeping daughter's hair, looking at her innocent face. A sharp pain stabbed at her heart. Was she putting Sophie in danger? Was she about to drag her own child into the darkness that surrounded Faulkner? For a split second, she wanted to quit, to run away and forget everything. But she shook her head. If she gave up, who would get justice for the Millers? She couldn't let her daughter see her as a parent who ran away from the truth. "I'll protect you, Soph, I promise," she whispered. It was a promise to Sophie, to her late husband, and to herself. She sat down and stared at the investigation map she'd pinned to the wall. Faulkner, the developer, Sarah Miller, the dots were connecting, forming the outline of a monstrous crime. But the most important question remained. Where was Leo Miller? Was he still alive? Just then, Max, who had been lying quietly at her feet, let out a low growl. The fur on his back stood on end. He was staring intently at the window, a deep, warning rumble coming from his chest. His gaze was fixed on a single spot in the darkness outside, as if he could see an invisible enemy hiding there. Chloe held her breath and followed his gaze. The car park across the street was shrouded in shadow, beyond the reach of the streetlights. It looked empty, but Max's growling grew more intense. An animal's senses were far sharper than a human's. He could see something she couldn't. "We're being watched." A cold sweat trickled down her back. Had Faulkner realized she was onto him? Or was it the developer's thugs? Either way, the enemy was close. On the other side of that darkness, someone was waiting to silence him for good. Chloe stood up, shielding her sleeping daughter with her body, and peered through a crack in the curtains into the deep night. The silent, deadly game of cat and mouse had begun. The next morning, a call came from her informant. His voice was tense. "Chloe, listen up. Faulkner met with Vince, the head of that development company. Last night, it was at a rundown, isolated pub on the outskirts of the city. My guy risked his neck to get a recording." The audio file arrived on Chloe's phone. She plugged in her earphones and hit play. Through the static, she could hear Faulkner's familiar voice and the gravelly tones of another man. "Faulkner, when am I getting the land? The higher-ups are getting impatient," Vince growled. Faulkner's reply was chillingly calm. "Relax, Vince. The mother's been dealt with. The problem is the kid and the deed. The land transfer isn't legal without his signature. Just give me a little more time." The mother's been dealt with. The words were like a shard of glass in her ear. Sarah Miller was dead. Chloe bit her lip, fighting back a wave of fury. "We don't have time," Vince snapped. "That ex-cop, Callahan, she's sniffing around. Just get the kid to sign. If he won't, break one of his fingers." "No," Faulkner said sharply. "Don't damage the goods. The kid is still valuable. I'll take care of Callahan. Don't you worry." The recording ended there, but it was more than enough. Leo was alive. He was being held somewhere, forced to sign over his family's land. And Faulkner knew she was coming for him. He was going to take care of her. Panic and rage surged through her. There was no more time. Leo's life was on the line. Chloe made a decision. There was no time to gather more evidence. She had to walk straight into the lion's den. The pub from the recording, it was probably near their hideout. And Leo was likely there too. She went to the back of her wardrobe and pulled out the worn service pistol she'd kept after leaving the force. The heavy weight of the steel in her hand solidified her resolve. First, she had to ensure Sophie was safe. She called Mark Riley, her old partner from the force. He was the only one she still trusted completely. He was a good cop, a decent man. "Mark, it's me. I need a massive favor. I need you to take Sophie. Right now. Don't ask why. I'm about to kick over a hornet's nest." Mark, sensing the gravity in her voice, just said, "Bring her over." Chloe entrusted her sleeping daughter to Mark. She put Max in the passenger seat and drove out into the night. The GPS was locked onto the location of the pub. It wasn't far from the bushland where she'd found the photo. This wasn't an investigation anymore. It was a rescue mission. And it was a war against the man who had betrayed her. Her car cut through the darkness, fueled by a burning fire of vengeance. The remote, dilapidated pub was sunk in a deep, menacing silence. Chloe parked a short distance away and crept towards the building, leaving Max in the car. "You wait here, mate, and stay quiet, understand?" she whispered. Max whined softly, his eyes fixed on the building. Chloe slipped her pistol into the waistband of her jeans and moved silently into the shadows. Through a grimy window, she could see a faint light glowing from a back room. There were people inside. This was it. She crept along the wall until she was right outside the room. She could hear voices inside, muffled by the wall. One of them was Faulkner's. She pressed her ear to the wall unlistened. "So, has the kid cracked yet?" It was Vince, the developer. "Nah, he's a tough one," Faulkner replied, his voice disturbingly casual. "Told him what happened to his mum. And he didn't even shed a tear. Just stares." Chloe's blood boiled. How could they be so cruel to an 8-year-old boy? "Useless brat," Vince grumbled. "All right, forget it. The exchange is tomorrow. I've told the buyers." "Exchange? What do you mean?" "Some overseas syndicate. They have a thing for kids like him. We're giving him the boy in exchange for them handling the land deed legally. A little bonus for getting rid of his mother for us." At that moment, something inside Chloe snapped. Leo was being sold. Sold like an object. Tomorrow, he would be gone forever. Time was up. Her reason was consumed by rage. She had to get in there now. But where was Leo? In her haste, her foot knocked over a loose pile of bricks. A loud clatter echoed in the night. Damn it, it was too late. "Who's there?" The voices inside stopped. A heavy door swung open, and several large, imposing thugs burst out into the darkness. "There she is," one of them yelled, pointing straight at Chloe. There was nowhere to run. Chloe braced herself, her hand gripping the pistol at her waist. Faulkner appeared in the doorway. His face showed a flicker of surprise, then settled into a cold, knowing smirk. Well, Chloe, did you really think I wouldn't see you coming? You know too much now." At his signal, the men charged. The situation was hopeless, but Chloe felt no fear, only a burning rage that she had failed to save Leo. She dodged the first man, using his momentum to throw him into the second. The third came at her with a tire iron. She blocked it with her forearm, a sharp pain shooting up to her shoulder. But there were too many of them. They were professionals. One of them tackled her legs, bringing her to the ground. Boots rained down on her, kicking her ribs, her back. Her breath was knocked out of her. Her vision started to blur. Faulkner walked over, grabbed her by the hair, and forced her head up. "Too bad," Chloe, your brand of justice ends here. The official story will be that you died resisting a robbery. No one will ever know you were after me." His eyes were cold, empty of the warmth and respect they once held. They were the eyes of a monster. "Dave," she choked out, her consciousness fading. He pulled something from his jacket and pressed it against her neck. The cold touch of metal. This was it. This is how it ends. "Sophie, I'm sorry. Leo, I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." She closed her eyes, ready for the end. And then, a sound ripped through the night. A savage, ferocious roar that seemed to shake the very ground. It wasn't the bark of a dog. It was the howl of a wolf filled with rage and grief. Faulkner and his men froze. Turning towards the sound, the passenger side window of Chloe's car exploded outwards in a shower of glass. A yellow blur shot out from the shattered window. It was Max. He had defied her order, sensed her danger, and come for her. His eyes were red, his teeth bared. He was no longer a dog. He was a beast born of fury. He launched himself at the nearest thug, sinking his teeth deep into the man's arm. A scream of agony pierced the air. The scene descended into chaos. The men panicked. Chloe saw her chance. With the last of her strength, she kicked Faulkner's legs out from under him and staggered to her feet. "Get him, Max," she yelled. As Max attacked another man, Chloe scrambled back into the darkness. "They're getting away," a voice shouted behind her. She stumbled through the scrub, her entire body screaming in pain. She had to run. They had seen her face. Sophie wasn't safe anymore. She reached her car. Max, sensing her, leaped into the back seat. Chloe slammed the car into gear and sped away, tires squealing on the gravel. In the rearview mirror, she saw Faulkner's face, twisted with rage, before it was swallowed by the night. Her hands shaking, she called Mark. "Mark, it's me. Listen, they know. They're coming. Protect Sophie. Whatever you do, protect her." Her voice was breaking. She was alone, hunted by criminals and betrayed by the system she once served. Could anyone help her now? "Of course, mate." Mark's strong voice came through the phone. "What are partners for? We're in this together." Hearing those words, Chloe finally let the tears fall. In her loneliest hour, that one sentence saved her. Chloe met up with Mark and told him everything. Faulkner's betrayal, the land deal, the plan to sell Leo. Mark's face twisted with rage. "The whole force has gone rotten since you left. Chloe, blokes like him are running the show now." Knowing the risk to his own career, Mark promised his full support. First, he arranged for Sophie to be moved to a secure police safe house. Then, Mark's son, Josh, a brilliant hacker, got to work. They set up a makeshift command center in Mark's garage. The recorded conversation played over and over in Chloe's mind. "The exchange is tomorrow. Where?" "Got something," Josh suddenly yelled from his laptop. He'd found it. The development company owned a large, abandoned woolshed on a remote farm property. It hadn't been used in years, but satellite images showed vehicle movement there over the last few nights. A remote farm, a perfect place for a quiet, illegal exchange, not a ship, a light aircraft on a dusty, private airstrip. "Leo's there," Chloe said, her voice firm, "and the exchange is happening tonight." They couldn't call it in. If Faulkner got tipped off, Leo would be dead. "It's just you and me," Chloe said. Mark simply nodded. It was a suicide mission, and they both knew it. But to save a child's life, and to reclaim their own honor as police officers, they had no other choice. Josh hacked into the property's old security system, providing a layout of the woolshed and camera blind spots. They planned their infiltration. Chloe knelt down and stroked Max's head. "You stay here with Josh. Mate, this is the last fight." Max seemed to understand, letting out a single, soft bark. Night fell. Dressed in dark clothes, Chloe and Mark moved through the darkness of the countryside towards the woolshed. The smell of eucalyptus and dry earth hung in the air. Waiting for them were ruthless criminals. But there was no fear left in their hearts. Just the mission, to save one small life. Two former cops walked into their final battle. The silence of the remote farm was deafening. Following Josh's directions on their phones, Chloe and Mark slipped past security cameras and reached the back of the massive, corrugated iron woolshed. A heavy chain was wrapped around the doors, held by a rusty padlock. Mark made quick work of it with a pair of bolt cutters. "Let's go," Chloe whispered. They slipped inside. The air was cold and smelled of lanolin and rust. Giant, silent machines used for shearing sheep stood like ancient skeletons in the gloom. Following the layout, they moved towards the office area. But it was too quiet. The silence felt wrong. They kicked open the office door. Empty. A few half-empty coffee cups sat on a desk. But there was no one there. "Something's not right," Mark muttered. At that moment, a heavy clang echoed from behind them. The main doors they had entered through had been slammed shut and locked from the outside. "It's a trap." As soon as she said it, floodlights mounted on the ceiling flickered on, bathing them in a blinding glare. "Welcome, Chloe and Mark. I didn't think you'd betray me too," a voice called down. They looked up. Standing on a catwalk above them was Dave Faulkner. Beside him stood Vince, the developer, and behind them, a dozen thugs armed with metal pipes and bats emerged from the shadows. Every exit was blocked. They were completely surrounded. Faulkner had known they were coming all along. "How?" Mark breathed, stunned. "Your son, Mark," Faulkner sneered. "From the moment his little fingers started tapping on my network, I knew your every move." He had let Josh find the woolshed, baiting the trap. "Where is Leo?" Chloe screamed. Vince let out a sick laugh. "The kid's not here. He's on a plane, halfway across the Pacific by now, I'd say." "Ha!" Despair hit Chloe like a physical blow. They were too late. Their whole plan had been a sham. "Now," Faulkner said, his voice cold, "let's finish this." At his signal, the men swarmed them. "Sorry, Chloe," Mark yelled as he charged one of them, only to be struck down from behind with a piece of timber. Chloe was quickly overpowered, pinned to the ground, her ability to fight gone. A heavy blow to the back of her head. Her vision swam. Defeat. The word echoed in her mind as Faulkner's triumphant laughter rang in her ears. Was this how it ended? Was evil going to win? In her fading consciousness, she saw Sophie's face, and Leo's sad, lost eyes. As she lay on the dusty floor, pinned down and fading, Chloe looked up at Faulkner's twisted, victorious smile. Mark was already unconscious. It was over. Just as she was about to let the darkness take her, a deafening, savage roar erupted through the shed. It wasn't just a bark, it was a sound of pure, concentrated fury and grief. Faulkner and his men froze, startled, standing in the now open doorway. His body tensed and coiled like a spring. Was Max. He must have broken free from Josh and followed him here. His fur was on end. His eyes were burning red. And a low, murderous growl rumbled from his chest. This was not the broken-down dog from the roadside. This was a proud, vengeful wolf, fighting for the only family he had left. "What the hell? Where did that mutt come from?" one of the thugs stammered. Max's eyes weren't on the thugs. They were locked onto one man, the source of all his pain, Dave Faulkner. In the next second, Max launched himself forward, a yellow streak of lightning. He moved so fast he was just a blur, weaving between the stunned men. He bolted up the stairs of the catwalk and, without hesitation, leaped through the air, aiming straight for Faulkner's throat. A scream of pain and terror echoed through the shed. Max had sunk his teeth deep into Faulkner's arm, shaking his head back and forth like a predator. The sudden, brutal attack shattered the thug's confidence. In that single moment of chaos, Chloe saw her opening. With a primal scream, she surged up from the floor, smashing her forehead into the jaw of the man holding her down. She snatched the iron pipe from his hand and began to fight back. The sight of Max's suicidal bravery had reignited the fire within her. She was no longer just a victim, she was a warrior. Her ferocious attack sent the hired thugs, who were only motivated by money, scattering in fear. Chloe raced up the stairs to where Faulkner was screaming, trying to shake Max off his arm. She grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "Faulkner!" The rage and grief erupted from her in a wordless scream. She hit him again and again. "Where is he? Where is Leo?" She stared into his tear-streaked, terrified face. Vince had lied about the plane. Her detective's gut knew it. Leo had to be here. "Tell me, or I swear to God, you die right here." Seeing the pure, murderous intent in her eyes, Faulkner finally broke. His shaking hand pointed to a spot on the floor below, beneath a huge, stationary piece of shearing equipment. It was a cleverly hidden trapdoor to a cellar. In the depths of despair, the roar of one loyal dog had brought him a miracle. The trapdoor was a thick sheet of steel set into the concrete. Chloe used the iron pipe as a lever to pry it open. With a groaning shriek of rusted metal, a wave of cold, damp air washed over her. A set of steep steps led down into darkness. She quickly checked on Mark. He was stirring, conscious. "Mark, get up, call for ambos and backup. Now." Leaving him to it, Chloe used her phone's torch to light the way and descended into the cellar. Max followed silently at her heels. The air below was freezing, thick with the smell of damp earth and mold. At the far end was a small room. In front of it, a simple table and chair, with a half-eaten sandwich. The guard's post. Chloe took a deep breath and pushed open the steel door. It wasn't locked. The room was pitch black. The beam of her torch found a small cot against the far wall. On it, a small figure was curled up under a thin, filthy blanket. Leo? Chloe's voice trembled. The blanket moved. A small face turned towards the light. It was Leo Miller. His cheeks were hollow, his skin pale, but his eyes, refusing to be broken by despair, stared back at the intruder with a fierce light. "It's okay," Chloe said softly, taking a step closer. "I've come to get you out." At that moment, Leo's gaze shifted past Chloe and saw the figure standing behind her. The boy's tough, guarded expression crumbled instantly. Tears streamed down his face. "Max." It was a hoarse whisper, a sound that had been held back for months. The moment he heard his name, Max, who had been standing silently, let out a soft, heartbroken whine and rushed to the bed. He pressed against Leo's small body, licking the tears from his cheeks over and over again. Leo wrapped his thin arms around Max's neck, burying his face in his fur, his body shaking with silent sobs. It was the reunion of a boy and his loyal dog. Torn apart for months, Max had never given up. He had survived on his own, searching, always searching for the boy who was his entire world. The sight of it broke through Chloe's own hardened exterior, and hot tears streamed down her face. She had made it. She had saved him. The pride she had lost as a detective, the honor she thought was gone forever, was returned to her in that single, beautiful moment. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air. Faulkner, Vince, and their entire crew were arrested. As Leo was carried out by a paramedic, he refused to let go of Max's fur. He looked at Chloe, his voice small but clear. "Thank you." With that one phrase, all of Chloe's pain and struggle washed away. Weeks passed. The corruption scandal rocked the New South Wales police force. Chloe was offered her old job back, but she quietly refused. Her fight was over. All she wanted now was a peaceful life with Sophie. Leo went to live with distant relatives, and it was decided that Max would go with him. On the day they left, Chloe and Sophie stood on the platform at Central Station to see them off. Leo stood before Chloe and bowed his head deeply. "Thank you, Ms. Callahan. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to live a good life. For my mum." In that small boy, Chloe saw the strength of his mother. She placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. "I know you will, Leo. You've got Max with you." Max looked up at Chloe from Leo's feet. The sadness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a calm, peaceful light. It was as if he was saying, "Thank you, it's all okay now." The train doors closed, and the train slowly pulled away. Sophie waved until it was out of sight. Tears in her eyes, Chloe gently hugged her daughter. A few days later, Chloe drove Sophie back to that deserted spot on the Great Western Highway. The old man, Tom, was gone. All that was left was the faded cardboard sign, tumbling in the wind. Driving home into the setting sun, Sophie spoke softly from the back seat. "Mum, I don't think Max was looking for a new owner." Chloe nodded. "No, he wasn't, sweetie. He was looking for someone to help him protect his boy. He was looking for someone who could give their tragic story the right ending." A warm light filled Chloe's heart. She had lost so much, but she had gained something immeasurable. She had grown, not as a cop, but as a person, as a mother. She could no longer feel Max's warm presence in the car, but the spirit of that proud, loyal Kelpie would live in her heart forever. Looking ahead, towards tomorrow, the car drove on. A new story for a mother and daughter was just beginning. And the sky, as if to bless their future, was painted a brilliant, burning red.